Okay, students, welcome to session 5 of our poetry workshop. Today we have two poets, Lisbeth Coiman and Luis Villalobos. So first I'd like to introduce you to Lisbeth so she can say a few introductory words while I bring up her poems.
Hello, how are you? My name is Lisbeth Coiman. I'm originally from Venezuela. I'm also a Canadian and American citizen. I teach literacy skills to adults at an adult school in San Pedro. And I am also a writer and poet. I have a book of memoir called I Ask the Blue Heron, independently published in 2017. And I have an upcoming book with Finishing Line Press that goes on pre-sales tomorrow called Uprising Alzamientos, and is a collection of poetry dedicated to the struggle for democracy and freedom in my homeland, Venezuela. I live in LA and I'm a hiker.
Well, then we are definitely ready to dive into your poetry. This first one looks monumental. Want to talk about it?
Allyship it was a poem I wrote specifically for an event on allyship in the wake of the demonstrations across the nations against police brutality and violence against Black people. So I call this poem allyship because that's what I feel is what everybody should do, is reach out across the aisles and create allyship between groups so that we can support each other. Especially coming from the Americas, we have a shared history of slavery and a shared history of oppression of marginalized groups. And so I call out on those, on that shared history and those commonalities between people of color in the Americas and African Americans in the United States. There it goes. Allyship. 1. Identify the hair root cause of self-hatred. Mother washing my hair with chamomile tea to make it blonde, but she only made me a bachaca, yellow. All throughout my childhood, I never understood why a woman who despised Black people married the son of a Black woman, gave him 7 children. I wasn't the darkest, just the one with chicharrones. The kinky hair she grabbed with one hand to slam my head against the wall because I was a carefree tomboy who still don't give a damn about straight hair. Bachaca, machorra, she used to call me. 2. At the hair salon, the enlightened witnesses show me the beauty of my hair, celebrate the woolly texture of my unruly curls, my negritude. 3. Recognize all forms of hate as corrosive acid destroying our society: xenophobia, homophobia, ableism, sexism, ageism, religious intolerance. Refuse to laugh at jokes about the white man in white coat versus a Black man in white coat, nor accept negative comments about unsafe Black neighborhoods or women, men, children. Instead, ask, what do you mean? Not because I don't know what you mean. I know exactly what you mean. No, I'm not complacent, nor participant, nor do I allow you to use my lighter skin as a platform. 5. Native American, African American, marginalized American, from Patagonia to Canada, Hear the silences hidden in the white spaces between lines in the history books of the Americas. 6. Black culture was not created for white entertainment. 7. In the classroom, teach tolerance. Encourage new immigrants to preserve their culture and language while shedding the biases and prejudices we all carry in our immigration baggage. 8. Do not question younger generations' right to choose between protest and self-preservation, place themselves between an armed policeman and a Black man, or pretend invisibility on their way to a supermarket. Celebrate amalgamated ethnicity, honor the ancestors of this continent. I'm not your mulata, nor your criollita, your colonized view of my complex identity. I am a brown woman, una morenaza, bella, loca, inmigrante. I am the other, my ears wide open, receiving the call for action. Thank you.
All right. Much to talk about here. Get back to the start. There we are.
So the first thing I do in this poem is acknowledge my negritude and how even coming from a rural part of my country in Venezuela, which doesn't apparently have the history of pain that African Americans have in the United States, what I do at that first stanza is recognize that negritude is also problematic in other latitudes in the Americas. Where there is blunt racism and systemic racism here to prevent the advancement of African Americans, there is colorism in the Americas, where we are treated differently when for our African features. And in my case, the most prominent is my hair. So my mother, an immigrant from Spain, well, descendant of immigrant from Spain, carry all her racism with her and pass it on to her children. And I was the darkest. I also recognize in the second stanza that it is what I call enlightened witness, those adults who ease the pain of trauma. And in this case, it was the hairdressers who in North America who have taken care of my hair, who made me see the beauty of my hair because I couldn't see it. If you move the page forward, what I do from stanza 3 on is to establish what we need to do to create allyship. The first two already stated, so recognize what in you is similar to the ally, how the ally has provided opportunities for you to grow. But from stanza 3 to 9, it is like, okay, you also have to do this and recognize hate in these aspects of society, in these other expressions of hate that do not necessarily equate with race. Recognize also that the language in jokes, in comparisons, in everyday conversation is also a language that has to be deconstructed to understand how much hate and how much discrimination it carries. And in stanza 4, know that this is not just a problem of race, it's a problem for every other marginalized group of Americans. And when I say American, I don't say just the United States, that for us is a very limited way of seeing the Americas, because the Americas go from the Arctic, the Antarctic to the Arctic. So it is much more complex than the United States. And that we have shared history all over, from Argentina to Canada. We have shared history of slavery, of genocide of indigenous people, of colonization, and all the weight of colonization in our culture. In the brief stanza 6, I also pay tribute to the Black culture, that people think that is there only to entertain the general public, but also Black culture has been a way of African Americans to express identity, to create community, to create language, or to rewrite history. It's not entertainment. And then I bring myself back to the poem, and as a teacher, understand what's my role when I work with immigrants. For the last 25 years, I have worked with immigrants, both in Canada, the United States, and I have recognized in me and in my students the biases and prejudices that we also carry. The stanza 8 responds to a conversation I heard about people not wanting to participate in the protest. And I say, well, you can't question people who are just surviving. And we survive in whatever way. We survive by facing the oppressor, or we survive by writing or creating music or talking about it, not necessarily on the street. So we don't have any right to question how each one decides to create awareness or be participant of the movement. And in number 9 is celebrate. I recognize the parts of the individual who are that are different, that are not mainstream, and from there, from that complex identity, then respond to the call of action. So the poem ends with a call for action, and the call for action is to have the ears open, to see where is the call, to see what is your role. That's my explanation. A little long explanation.
And a perfect way to go into the next poem, another action.
Okay, so this is exactly an example of what I said before. And the example was provided in the news in September 17th, 2020. With a major journalistic event that got swept under the rugs by the death of Ruth Bader. I never can say that name correctly. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the Supreme Court judge that died on September the 18th. So the news shift immediately to the death of the Supreme Court judge and her replacement in the court, and all the puzzle and commotion that went on to it. And this particular major journalistic event got forgotten very quickly. A nurse, her name is Dawn Wooten, and she blew the whistle on the extraction of uteri, should I say, in the ICE camps. Basically, doctors were practicing total hysterectomies on immigrants, on refugee and asylum seekers in those camps, detained in those camps, and against their will, and sometimes against their knowledge, not even notifying them of what they were doing. And so this woman, who happens to be a Black woman, who is very aware of the practice of eugenics across the decades in this country, practice that started with the indigenous people and went on with Black people. And they're now doing the same thing with Latino women. So she stood up and she blew the whistle. And this is the poem. Why the Nightingale Sings for Dawn Wootton. At the top of an ebony tree in the forest of our shared pains, a nightingale sings a lament for our brown selves thrown against each other in the novel virus spreading vortex of dog cages. Lament for our uteri, bleeding after rape, after the agony of having children taken away, dysmenorrhea, the red agony of exhausted ovaries swallowing daily cocktails of misogyny and xenophobia inside the ICE concentration camp. On surgical tables, healthy ovaries mistaken for cystic ones, then both removed from semi-etherized female brown women, for brown women unable to refuse treatment, unable to understand their fruitless future of muted mamas and abuelas, brown women unable to stand up for their own humanity, brown children taken with the precision of a scalpel, forever unconceivable here or there, even when sent back to where they came from, on top of an ebony tree, in the forest of our shared pains, the nightingale sings in the dawn of our uprising. So there are the poem has 3 literary references. The Caged Bird Sings by Why the Caged Bird Sing by Maya Angelou. So I don't say caged bird, I say nightingale, because nurses have, it's not a, it's the Nightingale pledge, where they pledged a defense of the patient, much like doctors have a pledge, like a moral pledge. It's not written in law, but it's like a moral pledge, where they say they will never risk their life, or they will never do anything that attempts to the life or integrity of the patient. And so she honors her pledge and sings, and in criminal jargon, sings is to go and tell the police, right? Like a snitch. The other reference is a little bit more complicated. It's on surgical table, semi-etherized women. And this calls exactly to T.S.E. Eliot, the ballad of Alfred Prufrock, where semi-etherized women on tables, on surgical tables. It has something like that line. And the last reference is Uprising, because my upcoming book is called Uprising, is precisely going against the system, resisting the oppression, how many the many forms and phases of the resistance, and this is one of those phases of the resistance. So to begin with, there are 3 literary references in the poem, and then I call for share pain, a forest of share pain, the ebony tree being the Black woman, and a forest of shared pains, because they are many countries represented in those concentration camps that have a shared history with the United States of slavery and oppressed people. The images of the IC camp with the dog cages, which is literally what's happening. And then probably the most difficult thing in the second stanza is the word dysmenorrhea. That means the menstrual period with a lot of pain. That's exactly the medical term for when you experience cramps, but cramps that do not see to medication. That's dysmenorrhea.
Yeah.
What else? What else is there that should be?
We've already gone to 20 minutes, but I've learned a lot, so thank you so much. I'm going to, just to make sure we have equal time, I'm going to try to give Luis his 20 minutes right now, and there should be a little time left over for questions. Luckily, I know that Luis's poems are right above yours.
Okay.
That'll make it easy to find. Let's see, here's the first one. Luis, did you want to say anything before you start reading your poems?
Yeah, my name is Luis Pastor Villalobos. I'm born and raised in Tijuana until I was 10 years old, and I was brought here against my will by my parents to find a better life. And I tried to make a better life of myself. I've had a rough life, a rough childhood, as a lot of people do. And I tell people, life gave me a lot of challenges, and I gave life 4 published books. So I took what somebody might say, well, this is a bad thing and I can't do anything about this. I'm just going to be a loser all my life. I said to myself, I was 10 years old, I said, I'm going to be a winner. And that's basically what I'm still saying now at age 64. Now, in this book here, usually I'll read a poem called Corexican. I'm not gonna do that today. I'm gonna do something different. But just, I'm part Korean and part Mexican. I have suffered a lot of racism by Mexicans, by blacks, by whites, by everybody. Because as a child growing up, I had to explain myself to people why my eyes were slanted, why I spoke Spanish and not Chinese. So yeah, so that has been an experience, and I identify with what was your name again, ma'am?
Lisbeth.
With Lisbeth. I identify with you, Lisbeth, where people just don't want to accept you for what you are. So my heart goes out to you. Yeah, so what's the name of my first poem, Don?
Oh, can you see it? Born to be a Winner. It's on screen.
Oh yeah, okay. Born to be a Winner. All right, good. I'm gonna read it from my book. I think it might be easier to read it.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Okay, so Born to be a Winner. I have a style that was born all of it by itself. Originally, I was going to put a picture here and then the poem. I felt that the picture was part of it, but the publisher said, write a paragraph instead because it's going to cost too much money to have a color picture on every page. So I have a little backstory to my poem, okay? And I have a little short paragraph in the poem here, you see it. And so the poem goes like, the backstory goes like this. There's a message here. I thank God that I am different. I made decisions in life and stayed after them. I believe we're all winners, born to accomplish goals in life. Some people reach their goals early in life and others in their later years. I am not finished with my goals yet. I have many more dreams to follow. I will be finished when I am laid to rest. Okay. So this is motivational poem. I'm not bragging about myself. All these things are true. All right, here goes. Ready? Born to be a winner. Out of 7 brothers and sisters, I am the only one who can swim, the only one who has published a book, the only one who is trilingual. Out of 7 brothers and sisters, I am the only one who has traveled to Europe, the only one trained in martial arts, the only one who raps educational songs. I was born to be a winner. Out of 7 children, the only one who has visited the pyramids of Mexico, El Zócalo, Chichen Itza, Teotihuacan. I was born to be different. The only one who rides the bus, the only one who writes poems. Will I also be the only millionaire? Now, I asked that question not because I want money, but because I want money to do great things. Unfortunately, it takes money to do things in life. Okay. What's next, Don?
Okay. The Given Air, that seems appropriate.
Yeah. And I chose this poem Given Air because it kind of takes off on that I'm a winner poem. And you know, Given Air, I mean, it tells you right away what it's about, right? By the name. But you know, if you die with $1 million in the bank, it's a tragedy. You have to give your money away. What's the point? We don't take it with us. So here's the introduction. Okay, it's called Given Air. It goes reflection. You know, money comes and goes. The money we don't use will not go with us when we die. The good deeds we do will. They are memories of the good things in life. When you have the opportunity to help someone, not only will you help them, but you will receive a blessing as well. So right now, you know, the problem with homelessness is growing a lot. And I'd like to be able to have enough money to just make a difference. Okay. So here's the poem. It's called Given Air. I want to be a million. I want $1 million so that I can give 1 million. I want to give to my wife, my children, my students, myself. I want to give to the Lord's church the 10% that is his. Save 10% for emergencies, to live debt-free, pay cash only. I want to have millions to help tens of thousands. I know there are lots of needs, poverty, unemployment, drug addiction. I want to give people their dream house, job, financial freedom. The poor shall be with us forever, Jesus said. I want to be a giver so I can help a few. Okay, so that's a Given Air. And by the way, I'm on the road. I'm on the road to that. Now that I'm retired, I'm doing a lot of businesses, and it's working out really good for me. So, yeah.
So there's still hope.
What's next, Don?
I'll tell you what. Why?
Oh yeah. Okay. Now, I chose this poem because, you know, with the election and, you know, and Trump and all that, it seems like religion became part of this election. And as a Christian myself, I'll tell you, I am not a Trump Christian. I don't identify with the you know, right wing hardcore Trumpists that say that Trump is elected by God to be our president, or was anyhow. I believe in more believing in Jesus because it makes sense to me. And so I'm not trying to push religion. I'm just sharing myself, and the poem Why kind of represents the way I feel, because people claim to know the answer to everything, but I am like a child. I like to ask why, because I have doubts. And if I don't admit my doubts, then I'm not being honest with you or myself or with God. So here's my introduction. It goes like this. Message. I like this poem a lot. It is probably my favorite, but I say that about almost all my poems. This one is special. This one is special because it asks the perpetual question, why? People pretend to have the answer to this question, but a child's curiosity is never quenched. The truth is, I think that what we think we know is all based on faith. Evidence is worthless without faith. Okay, so here's my poem. Why? Why? Why did you die for me on the cross? Why was I born with a sinful nature? Why was I given the knowledge between good and evil? Why do I have a free will to do what I want? Why are you the only begotten Son of God? Why are you the only way to the Father? Why are you seated at the right hand of the Father? Why did you send the counselor to take your place? Why must I love you with all my heart, soul, and might? Why do you say there is a lake of fire? Why do other people say there is no hell? Why do some believe there is a purgatory? Why do some say you don't exist? Why are there so many religions? Why does everyone else say everyone else is wrong? Why don't you just explain it to us? Why? Okay. So I'm not looking for an answer, no. And I hope you are not either, because this is a very complex thing. It's that the answer is really within you. Why do you want to believe in God? There's the word why again. To me, it makes sense. To me, it's hopeless. All these problems. I think that although I don't, hell is an ugly thing to think about, but when I think of people like Trump and like Hitler, I'm thinking to myself, there has to be a hell. I'm sorry. There has to be consequences. We all have conscious of good and evil, and we all say, you know, that person should get rewarded, that person should not. You know, that's all I'm gonna say. I'm ready for questions and answers.
Well, that took 15 minutes. So you know what that means.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
I'm thinking the same thing the students are thinking at this time.
Okay.
Hey, Elizabeth only got to read 2 poems. What the heck? Well, we have time for that 3rd poem now, and then we can do the Q&A. Is that okay?
Yeah, me? Okay.
I think
Yeah.
your poem not too far away. Let's see if I'm right or wrong.
Okay. The last one, right? Did you
Yeah,
get it? Did you find it?
just found it. There it is.
This poem is not political. This poem is not erotica. This poem is not about nothing. It's just about the joy of writing. If I fall silent today, my hair will weave verses in the silver strands between the black lines. Ellipses will well my eyes run down the cobbled streets of my face, while question marks will, like ornaments, will dangle from my earlobes, attentive to the silences of others. My tongue will edit the past mistakes of my actions. The scar on my face will spell agony in all caps. Bolded letters will grow from the tips of my nails. The freckles on my back will tell impossible stories of a tropical land located right under my eyelids. The keloid on my navel will zipper the wounds of birth with suture screams. The sweat under my breast and armpits will draw descriptions of the solitary roads I transit without making a sound, like run-on sentences in the social distance between us. My knees will write prayers with thick chalk sticks on the sidewalk, punctuate them with each deformed pore of my skin. If I fall silent today, my body will speak for me.
Yo.
Nice.
Usually, Elizabeth has something to say after each of her poems. Is that true?
Excuse me?
Usually, after each of your poems, you have something to say. This
Oh,
one, you're silent for some reason.
this poem is, it was prompted. It was prompted in a workshop. The prompt was, if I fall silent today. And it could go anywhere. And for some reason, I thought that, well, you know, people who are silent because they have a disability or because they cannot speak, like dead bodies, for instance, the body speak for themselves. The deaf person will use her hands and gestures to express herself. But I remember one poem that I wrote recently that is going into my collection. Is a poem about a dead body, somebody who died of torture, and I had to read the entire examiner's report to understand how the person died. And the body told the truth. And so that's probably what is in the background of my mind, the disability and dead bodies, how they tell a story, and when the person cannot speak. So that's what it was in the back of my mind. And I think my body has a lot to say.
And this poem is a great writing idea in itself too, to write a self-portrait, right?
No, the prompt was just, if I fall silent today. That was all they gave us.
Yeah, well, hey, you took it somewhere, definitely. This is really wonderful.
Thank you.
All right, so we do have that time. Got us perfectly timed now. Good complimentary pairing of poets. Each of you having so much to say about the world yesterday and today. Oh, excuse the rhyming there. It just came out that way. Oh, gotta stop rhyming.
You're a poet.
Oh,
Can't help it.
yeah. So I'll stop the screen share, then we can have a little discussion.
Mhm.
Students invariably always want to know the answer to this question of just about every guest poet. So I will pose their question to you. They always wonder, how did you become a poet? Who would like to answer that question first?
I am a gentleman.
Oh, he's deferring to Lisbeth.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
How?
I missed that. Thank you very much, Luis. I think I've always written, and when you are a mother, and this is true for many female writers, when you are a mother, you negotiate time to write, and sometimes the time left to write is so brief that you can only have time to jot down images or a metaphor here, a word there in your journals to expand later. And then when that time for expansion comes back, it's only 20 minutes or something. So poetry, because of its brevity, becomes the perfect medium for expressing ourselves. Also, I write a lot from trauma, and I find that sometimes trauma, or sometimes poetry, is the only way I have to excavate a trauma that resides 3,000, 5,000 miles away, because my trauma occurred in another country, in another era, in another language. So it is so far away that it can only touch it with brief images and metaphors or symbols. So that's how I become a poet. But because I need to express myself, and I didn't have the time to go book length and write, dedicate 4 or 5 hours a day to the business of writing. Now I am a full-time writer and a part-time teacher. And so I don't write isolated poems anymore. I write with book ideas in mind, and I search and actively engage in the submission process, which is very daunting too for publication. But the beginning of my journey as a writer was not even with publication in mind. It was just a need to express whatever life experiences I was going through. And I have journals dating back to my single mother years in Venezuela, 35, 36 years ago. And I had journals since I was 5 years old, but I wander around so much in my own country and in the world that I lost most of it. So I only have the most recent stuff.
Ouch, ouch, ouch. Luis, you have an answer?
I asked the question again.
How did you become a poet?
Okay. Piggybacking on what Elizabeth said, or Lisbeth, I forget. I'm dyslexic. I forget stuff. I think trauma would be the reason. When I was a teacher, I would never say this to my students, but now I say it publicly. I was sexually, emotionally, physically, just horrible stuff happened to me as a child. And the perpetrator was my oldest sister, who was 14 years older than I. So you can imagine how warped my brain became, how insecure I became as a boy around girls and just around people in general. And I too started writing since I was 10 years old. I had probably about over 50 short stories I had written by the time I was 13 years old. And that's when our house burned down, and my electric guitar, my amp, all my stories, and my parrot were all burned. But I only had enough time to run inside the house and save my niece, who was only 6 months old. And I knocked on the door where my sister-in-law was showering. I had just gotten home from school, and I was the kind of kid who went straight to school, straight home. And so I think in retrospect, everything I write, like I said earlier, life gave me challenges, but I gave life 4 published books. So I think that writing is a good way to get rid of your aggression, to get rid of your insecurities, to get to vent, to protest. I like what Lisbeth said, that there's different ways of protesting. You don't necessarily have to be the person who's out at trying to get a free color television on the day that they're doing the the riots, right? You can be staying at home just watching, like, hey, I wish I had that color television, so everybody has their reason for doing what they're doing, and you have to find your own reason, your own purpose. And mine is right here, that I wrote my another thing Lisbeth said, that she didn't have time to write. Well, I found out that I had time while I was on the bus.
Yes.
So that's why I call my poems Riding the Bus, Poetry in Motion. So I would say 99.99% of all my poems are all written on the bus, with the exception of those I wrote in Don Kingfisher Campbell's writing workshop. But even my other poems were like edited on the bus. Yeah.
Wow. The perfect segue into the second and final question, the teacher question.
Okay.
What advice would you give a young writer?
I'll let
You're
Lisbeth.
gonna defer again? Defer? Okay.
Yeah.
The first and most important advice to a writer is write daily. The second advice is read daily. Read enriches our vocabulary, our understanding of language, and writing refines our craft. I always say, there are people who say, oh, I dream of being a rock star. Well, my question to those people is always, what are you doing to become a rock star? So if you dream of being a writer, the question that follows is, what are you doing to be a writer? And also understand that the act of writing, putting pencil on paper, creating images or stories or whatever, and or writing on a keyboard, it's only a fraction of the job of a writer. You are writing, you are creating files that need to be organized, you're creating work that needs to be submitted, you need to network with your community, you have to become a literary citizen. What can you do for your community? What can you do to elevate the voices of those who are walking next to you on this journey? Participating in open mics and be participant. Have your face out there. Don't be afraid.
We're down to the 1 minute warning for this 45-minute recording. So you've got 1 minute, Luis, to add to what Lisbeth has said.
All right. My advice is have fun. Okay. Share yourself. with others, share your beliefs, your dreams, put it on paper, and just have fun. And just have fun. You know, I don't worry about measuring, rhyming, all that. At least I don't bother with that. I just write. I rhyme when I can, and I don't necessarily want to rhyme. I send a message. I want to motivate people to follow their dreams, to believe in yourself. That's it.
All right, thank you, Luis. That was a lot of literary food from my students. Thank you both, Lisbeth and Luis.
Thank you, John,
Thank
for
you.
that class.
Wonderful to look in depth at your poetry too. They got a real good look at it. That's what this is all about.
That's
All right,
awesome.
I'm going to remind the students, don't forget to do the worksheet for every video that you watch. And this recording is just about to end.